There's a version of Steve McQueen's garage the world never got to see. Not the Hollywood version, not the auction house version, the real one. The one he kept locked away from photographers, journalists, and collectors who would have given anything just to stand in the same zip code as these machines. We're talking about the cars he drove before sunrise when the roads were empty. The ones with no paper trail, no press photos, and no famous film scenes tied to them. McQueen understood something most people never figure out, that the things you protect by keeping quiet are always the things that matter most. In today's video, we're cracking that vault wide open. 7 secret machines from McQueen's world that flew under the radar, stayed hidden in the shadows of his legend, and yet tell us more about the man than any movie ever could. If this is your first time here and you love classic cars, American automotive history, and the greatest gearheads who ever lived, smash that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. You do not want to miss what's coming. Buckle up, because we're going somewhere most people never get to go. Car number 7, 1967 Chevrolet Corvette, Stingray L, 89 427. Let's start somewhere nobody expects. Not with a Ferrari, not with a Porsche, with an all-American bruiser that McQueen kept so far from the spotlight you'd almost think it never existed. The 1967 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray L, 89 427. Now, you've probably heard the story that McQueen was a European car man through and through. Porsches, Ferraris, Jaguars, that's what the books say. And mostly, yeah, they're right. But in the late 1960s, he quietly acquired one of the most ferocious production sports cars America had ever bolted together, and he told almost nobody about it. This Corvette came finished in a deep forest green with a black interior. Zero chrome showmanship, zero flashy options, just raw, unapologetic intention on 4 wheels. Under that long hood sat Chevrolet's legendary L89 Big Block, a 427 cubic inch V8, 3 two-barrel carburetors, 435 horsepower, and a 6,400 RPM redline that sounded like industrial machinery coming undone at the seams. 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. Top speed pressing toward 150 miles per hour. In 1967, that wasn't a car. That was a declaration. McQueen kept it away from everybody on purpose. No film tie-ins, no interviews, no magazine shoots. Just the Corvette, Pacific Coast Highway, and the kind of silence that only exists when the rest of the world is still asleep. He believed a powerful machine told you everything about a man's character, the way he handled it when things got uncomfortable. When he eventually let it go, he did it quietly. No ceremony. The way McQueen always moved on from things he'd already finished learning from. Car number 6, 1963 Jaguar E-type series, 1 Roadster. Number 6 might be the most visually devastating car on this entire list. The 1963 Jaguar E-type series, 1 Roadster, and when Enzo Ferrari himself reportedly described it as the most beautiful car ever made, you better believe Steve McQueen, a man whose eye for beauty was sharper than most people's eye for anything, wasn't going to let one slip past him. This particular E-type arrived in opalescent silver blue with a tan interior. The bonnet stretched long and impossibly low. The headlamps sat flush behind glass covers. Every line on this car looked like someone had spent years arguing about it and then got it exactly right. It whispered instead of shouted. That was unusual for McQueen's garage, but sometimes the quietest things have the most to say. Under that famous hood, a twin-cam 3.8-liter straight-six producing 265 horsepower. On paper, that sounds reasonable. In reality, with an exhaust note that had a personal disagreement with the laws of physics, it felt like considerably more. Top speed nudging 150 miles per hour in a car shaped like a sculpture. McQueen drove it through the canyons above Brentwood on evenings when he needed to clear his head. Not for speed, not for performance, just for the feeling. He once told a friend that in this car, with the top down and nothing but hills ahead, he could think more clearly than anywhere else on Earth. He deliberately kept it off the books, away from cameras, away from everyone. Some things you protect by never letting anyone know they exist. Car number 5, 1958, Lister-Jaguar Knobbly. Now we go all the way back, before the movie deals, before the fame, before the Ferraris and the magazine covers and the Hollywood paydays. There was a young, broke, hungry Steve McQueen tearing through amateur racing circuits in Southern California. And the car that may have lit that competitive fire hotter than anything else? The 1958 Lister-Jaguar Knobbly. Built by Brian Lister in Cambridge, England, this thing had a silhouette unlike anything else on the grid. The name came from its body, lumpy, curved aluminum work with aerodynamic bumps and shoulders that made it look like something between a sculpture and a weapon. Underneath all that distinctive bodywork sat a Jaguar 3.4-liter twin-cam, straight six, tuned for period racing, pushing around 250 horsepower in a chassis that existed for one purpose and one purpose only: winning. McQueen's relationship with this car was competitive and deeply personal. He wasn't driving it for fun. He was driving it to find out what he was made of. The Knobbly either made you faster or it broke you. McQueen chose faster every time. He raced it on tight, unforgiving circuits where the margins between glory and catastrophe measured in fractions of a second. Barely anyone knew he had it. That was exactly the point. The real Steve McQueen always lived in the places nobody was watching. Car number 4, the Solar Industries Jerrari. Now this next one is going to stop you cold because it has no manufacturer, no badge, no famous factory chassis number, and yet it might be the most purely McQueen machine on this entire list because he didn't buy it. He built it. Through his production company Solar Productions, McQueen commissioned the construction of what insiders called the Jerrari. The concept was simple and completely unreasonable. Take the tough, stripped-down body of a military-style short-wheelbase Jeep, rip out everything that wasn't essential, and drop a Ferrari 512 engine in where no Ferrari 512 engine had any business being whatsoever. Then point it at something fast and find out what happens. What came out the other side defied every automotive category you could name. Visually, it looked like something built for desert warfare. High ground clearance, open cockpit, zero creature comforts, zero apology. But underneath that Spartan shell was a 3.3-liter Ferrari 512 producing north of 280 horsepower in a vehicle that weighed almost nothing. The power-to-weight ratio landed somewhere between reckless and genuinely alarming. McQueen drove this thing through the canyons above Malibu on nights when the roads were his alone. There was no official documentation, no photographs, no paper trail worth chasing. The Jerrari lived entirely outside the world of concours events and collector catalogs. It lived only in the moments McQueen pointed it at a corner and found out, one more time, exactly what kind of man he was. And he always liked the answer. Car number 3, 1966, Ferrari 330 GTS Spider. Car number 3 brings us back to Italy, back to Maranello, and to a Ferrari that almost nobody publicly connected to McQueen while he was alive, the 1966 Ferrari 330 GTS Spider. He acquired this one through a transaction, so quietly handled, it barely left a paper trail. The 330 GTS was Ferrari's answer to a very specific kind of driver, someone who wanted the performance without making an announcement about it. A 4.0-liter Colombo 512 producing 300 horsepower, 0 to 60 in under 7 seconds. Top speed stretching toward 155 miles per hour with room to breathe. This wasn't a race car, and that's exactly what made it rarer than one. This was a Ferrari you could actually live with. McQueen's came in Blue Serra, a deep Italian navy that went almost black in shadow, with a tan leather interior that felt like a private reading room. He used this one differently than anything else in the garage. Not for racing, not for pushing limits. On certain evenings, he'd fold himself into that leather, thread the canyon roads above Brentwood, and let the V12 simply breathe. No destination, No agenda? Just the sound and the road and the particular peace that only exists when you're moving and nobody on earth knows where you are. For a man whose entire public life was defined by forward motion, the 330 GTS was the one place he allowed himself to slow down and feel something. That's exactly why he never talked about it. Some things change the moment you share them. Car number 2. And if you know endurance racing history the way a real gearhead knows it, that name alone just did something to your pulse. McQueen's production company acquired a 908/03 during the making of Le Mans, not as a movie prop, not as something to park in the background, but as an active racing vehicle to be driven hard and seriously. Porsche had developed the 908/03 specifically for tight technical circuits. Flat 8 3.0-liter engine, around 350 horsepower, in a chassis that weighed just over 500 kilograms. Think about that ratio for a second. This was one of the most sophisticated racing machines on the planet in 1970. And McQueen didn't just look at it from across the paddock, he drove it, full commitment. During pre-production testing at Circuit de la Sarthe, the actual Le Mans circuit, no shortcuts, he pushed the 908/03 alongside Porsche's own factory works drivers and matched their lap times closer than anyone in that garage expected. There are crew members and engineers who were present for those sessions who still talk about the moment McQueen posted a lap time that made the entire Porsche crew go quiet. They had underestimated him. They never made that mistake again. After filming Wrapped, the 908/03 disappeared into private hands with no ceremony whatsoever. No record auction, no announcement. Just quietly gone. The way the greatest racing cars always seem to vanish. Into the memories of the people who were there to watch them run at full noise on a real circuit with no safety net and no second takes. Car number 1, the Green Rat, 1956, Jaguar XKSS, chassis 713. And now we arrive, the crown, the one car that every collector, every historian, and every person who has ever truly loved a classic automobile knows about, and so few have ever completely understood. The 1956 Jaguar XKSS, chassis number 713, the car Steve McQueen called the Green Rat. Jaguar produced just 16 of these. 16. They were street-legal versions of the factory D-type Le Mans race car. Same twin-cam 3.4-liter straight six. Same lightweight aluminum body. Same racing bloodline, running through every weld and rivet. The factory bolted on a rudimentary windscreen, added a passenger seat, painted on the thinnest possible coat of civility, and handed them to buyers with a handshake and a quiet warning. McQueen bought chassis 713 in 1959. It arrived in white with a red interior, perfectly proper, thoroughly English. He looked at it for as long as it took to form an opinion, then had it repainted in a shade of British racing green so deep and mean it turned almost black in shadow. The red interior came out. Black leather went in. The Dunlop alloy wheels got polished until they reflected the road like mirrors. And the legendary customizer Von Dutch handled the detail work, including a special glove box latch designed to keep McQueen's belongings in place when he hammered through corners with the kind of commitment that gave passengers serious second thoughts about their life choices. He drove it like it was built for combat, because it was. In the first year alone, he collected speeding tickets the way most people collect parking stubs. There's a story, well-sourced and often repeated by people who knew him, that he once talked his way out of a citation by telling the officer his wife was in active labor. That's McQueen for you, completely cool under the absolute worst possible pressure, with lights flashing in the mirror. He sold it in the early 1970s. Not because he wanted to, because he felt the weight of what it was, too rare, too irreplaceable, and too honest with himself to keep destroying it the way he was destroying it every single weekend. But the heart doesn't do logic. By 1977, he had bought it back, and he kept it from that moment until November 7th, 1980, the day he died. After that, the green rat passed through the collection of Bill Harrah before finding its permanent home at the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles, where it lives today behind glass. Looked at by thousands, touched by nobody, fully understood by very few. Because here's the thing that makes the XKSS different from every other car on this list. The others were secrets, machines McQueen kept hidden because they were private. The XKSS was something else entirely. It was a confession. It was McQueen telling the world, in the only language he ever completely trusted, exactly who he was at the core, even when the world wasn't paying close enough attention to hear him. That's 7 cars, 7 stories, 7 windows into the corners of Steve McQueen's life that the world never got to properly see. What connects every single machine on this list isn't the rarity or the horsepower or the price tag, though they have all of those things in abundance. What connects them is character. Every one of them was chosen by a man who understood something profound, that the cars you pick when nobody is watching always tell the truest story of who you actually are. McQueen didn't build a collection. He built a biography, one car at a time, and the chapters he kept secret were always the most honest ones. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. Genuinely. This kind of history deserves to be told carefully, and you took the time to sit with it. If this is the first video of ours you've watched, subscribe our channel, Parallel America, right now. We have more stories just like this one waiting for you every single week. The rarest garages, the most legendary machines, and the men who drove them into history. And if this video did something for you, if it reminded you why you fell in love with classic cars in the first place, share it with someone who deserves to feel the same thing. Until next time, keep the revs up.